try to find answers to so many of the unknowns.
Part of what makes this search so challenging is just how vast the area around Nancy's home is. You can get a sense of it here. Pima County is about 9,000 square miles. That is larger than the entire state of New Jersey. And a lot of it looks like this: massive mountain ranges and the Sonoran Desert that stretches for miles.
If you believe every victim deserves to be remembered and every truth deserves to be told, subscribe to the Crime Narrator. These stories live on because you're here to hear them.
Minutes ago, a new claim surfaced in the ongoing disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, a claim suggesting investigators may have identified a previously unknown property connected to the case. Authorities have not confirmed the full details publicly, but sources close to the investigation indicate that detectives are examining what some are calling a hidden house. Nancy, 84, vanished from her home in Tucson on January 31, 2026. Evidence inside her residence, including signs of tampered surveillance equipment and blood later confirmed to match her DNA, led law enforcement to treat the case as a suspected kidnapping from the beginning. No ransom demand was ever made. No confirmed sightings followed. The phrase hidden house does not mean a secret underground location or anything fictional. Investigators often use such terms to describe properties that are not immediately linked to a suspect on paper: rentals, vacant homes, secondary residences, or structures held under another name. These locations can become critical in abduction cases when suspects attempt to isolate victims temporarily. At this stage, officials have not announced an arrest. They have not named a suspect. However, the review of additional properties signals that detectives believe this crime may have involved planning and access to more than one location. Law enforcement continues to emphasize that rumors circulating online are not verified facts. The investigation remains active and ongoing. If this newly examined property holds evidence, it could mark a turning point in the case. For now, authorities remain focused on confirmation before public disclosure. Like, share, and subscribe to the Crime Narrator for continued updates as this developing story unfolds. As talk of a possible hidden house circulates, investigators working the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie are focused on one thing: evidence. Not headlines, not speculation, evidence.
Is Monday morning, we have received a fourth letter from the same person who says that he knows where Nancy Guthrie is and he wants money in return for the information. Essentially, he wants the reward. So I have something to say to you, and I've already talked to the FBI about this, that if you are not real, you're committing a crime, and you should know that. And this is a serious federal crime. If you are real, this is the fourth letter you've sent, and I should tell everybody that in this letter, it says, I know what I saw 5 days ago south of the border, and I was told to shut up, so I know who he is, and that was definitely Nancy with them. This is the second time he has referred to more than one person involved in this. He said there is a main person and there are others, and he said it here. He is saying that Nancy was taken to Mexico. Now, this is what he's saying. I'm not going to vouch for him, but this is the fourth letter. We have sent them all on to the FBI. And he also says one of the reasons he's worried about coming forward is he has a record. He has a burglary on his record from 10 years ago. So I don't know if you're real or not, if you're watching this, but if you are, and I have told the FBI that we're going to do this, they know this, that if you're worried about getting this money, and you really do have this information, send it to us. You're sending us these letters. Send it to us. We will forward it to the FBI. And that way there's a record that we have that you supplied this information. If they find her and they find the kidnapper, then at least there is evidence, because we have it, that you're the one who provided the information. So this is a way for you to get that money if this really is.
When authorities examine a secondary property in a suspected kidnapping case, they are typically searching for trace indicators, fibers, fingerprints, DNA transfer, digital device signals, surveillance footage, or signs that someone stayed there temporarily. Even something as small as disturbed dust, recently moved furniture, or unusual utility usage can raise questions. Nancy disappeared from her home in Tucson during the night. Her medications were left behind. Security equipment was reportedly tampered with. Blood consistent with her DNA was found inside the residence. Those details suggest she did not leave voluntarily. If investigators are now examining another property, it likely means they developed a lead through digital forensics, vehicle tracking, phone data, or witness information. Modern investigations rely heavily on data mapping, identifying where devices traveled, which towers they connected to, and how long they remained in specific areas. Authorities have not publicly confirmed ownership of any secondary location. They have also not linked a named suspect to such a property. In cases like this, premature disclosure can compromise the investigation. The term hidden house may sound dramatic, but in law enforcement terms, it simply refers to a property not initially obvious in connection to the crime. It could be vacant. It could be rented. It could belong to someone not previously under scrutiny. At this stage, confirmation matters more than theory. And until officials speak publicly, any claims remain part of an ongoing investigation, not a conclusion. In cases like the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, major developments rarely happen by accident. If investigators are now examining what has been described as a hidden house, the lead likely came from careful analysis, not coincidence. Detectives often build timelines using layered sources of information. Phone records can show movement patterns. Vehicle tracking systems and traffic cameras can reveal routes taken during critical hours. Doorbell cameras from neighboring homes sometimes capture vehicles or individuals passing through an area unnoticed at first. Even financial transactions, such as fuel purchases or short-term rental payments, can point toward a secondary location. Nancy vanished from her home in Tucson during a narrow overnight window. Investigators have already confirmed suspicious elements inside the residence, including tampered surveillance and blood evidence. If they have shifted attention to another property, it suggests that digital or physical data connected someone from that timeline to a different address. Another possibility is witness information. Sometimes, a neighbor notices unfamiliar activity. Sometimes, a tip arrives days or weeks later when someone rethinks what they saw. Law enforcement reviews every credible lead, even those that initially seem minor. It is important to note that authorities have not announced that Nancy was taken to any confirmed location beyond her home. The investigation remains active, and no suspect has been publicly charged. However, when detectives broaden the search to additional properties, it usually indicates that the case has moved beyond theory and into targeted follow-up. Every step is deliberate. Every property examined has a reason. And somewhere within those locations may lie evidence that clarifies what happened that night. If investigators have indeed identified a secondary location connected to the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie,
all of the developments regarding the search for Nancy Guthrie. It is week 3 of that search, and investigators are still trying to recover more evidence, focusing also on some DNA found inside of a glove. I want to turn our attention now to Caroline Elliott with Fox News. She is joining us live just outside of Nancy's home. Caroline, what do we know in regards to where this investigation stands today?
Yeah, Krill, good morning. There's a lot to break down here this morning. The sheriff did share those DNA results yesterday, and he said that they put those DNA samples into the database and they did not get a match. So the sheriff says the work here is still underway. We know now his team is looking at additional DNA evidence inside the home to see if they can try to figure out who this person is.
We haven't narrowed it down to anything other than we have certain pieces of evidence.
The implications are serious. In suspected abduction cases, a second property often suggests planning rather than impulse. Nancy disappeared from her home in Tucson during the late-night hours. Evidence already made public indicates surveillance interference and blood found inside the residence. Those details alone point to foul play. But if someone transported her elsewhere, it would indicate forethought, a place prepared in advance or selected quickly for concealment. A secondary property can serve several purposes in criminal investigations. It may be a temporary holding location. It may be used to avoid detection in the immediate aftermath of a crime. It may even be a site where evidence was discarded or destroyed. Detectives examine such locations for biological traces, signs of cleaning.
For Nancy Guthrie, 18 days in now, and investigators acknowledge the only video they've recovered from the scene is the video already shared with the public. The new reporting tonight from Jonathan Bigliotti.
Tonight, the Pima County Sheriff tells CBS News that investigators have not ruled out an accomplice who may have entered Nancy Guthrie's home. This, as Sheriff Chris Nano says, the doorbell video of the masked male suspect seen outside Guthrie's front door is the only video they've been able to recover so far from multiple cameras at her home. Authorities also called on neighbors to check their cameras, but nearly 3 weeks into this search and not a single one appears to have captured anything suspicious. The FBI released this security video more than a week ago, and it remains the only concrete view of the suspect. DNA evidence recovered from the crime scene is still being analyzed, but has yet to yield results. The FBI has also visited multiple gun stores in Tucson based on this image. One shop owner says he was shown a list of names and photos.
Based on that video that I saw of the kidnapper, the facial hair that I saw on the video reminds me a lot of these photographs.
This as 88 Crime has increased its reward to $102,500 for information leading to an arrest in Guthrie's disappearance. The FBI is also offering a separate reward of $100,000. Meanwhile, police have deployed signal sniffer technology hoping to pick up pings from Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker.
These devices, what happens is they transmit every 2 to 3 minutes, and you're able to pick this specific signal up from hundreds of feet away up in the air and potentially locate Nancy.
And investigators tonight trying to work with the private sector to recover video from the home, but so far, not a single new frame has been discovered. Meanwhile, the FBI calling on the public for help. Anyone with information is asked to call those numbers. There are
unusual smells, disturbed soil, recently discarded materials, or digital device signals that place individuals there during the relevant time frame. Importantly, authorities have not confirmed that Nancy was ever taken to another house. They have not announced any arrests. The phrase hidden house may reflect investigative language rather than a confirmed fact. Still, when law enforcement allocates resources to search a new property, it usually follows a verified lead. That lead could come from cell phone data, vehicle GPS records, financial transactions, or credible witness statements. Investigations unfold step by step, rarely all at once. If this reported property contains relevant evidence, it could move the case forward in a measurable way.
A lock of hair, a drop of blood, something mailed to somebody so they could verify, yes, in fact, these people have my mother. Kidnappers want to get paid quickly. They don't want this thing to linger. If you're negotiating with another drug dealer in South America somewhere, it could go on for a few weeks, a month, until they get bored and decide this is not worth it. And it's either pay up or we're going to kill this person. And it's always a negotiation, right? The first figure they throw out is never what actually gets paid, like any good business deal. There's going to be a negotiation, but it's going to be a fast and hard one. And there's been no negotiations. No one's called up and said, hey, where's my money? That hasn't happened. For the simple reason is nobody's kidnapped her, I don't think. If you're a good kidnapper, you're going to grab the medication on the way out the door because you're going to have to take care of her. You're going to have to keep her alive and healthy, right? So it shows a total lack of planning. The total lack of forensic evidence of anyone being in that house, of grabbing her, is another clue that she wasn't kidnapped. You know, you walk in somewhere, you're going to leave something. I don't care who you are. You're going to leave some DNA, some footprints, some fingerprints, blood if anyone gets cut on glass or whatever. You know, listen, the FBI is great at crime scene processing. They've been processing this thing for, 6, 7, 8 days now. They've got nothing. If they had something, we'd have heard.
If not, detectives will continue to follow the next lead. For now, the search for answers continues. The reported claim about a possible hidden house may represent the most significant development yet in the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. But until law enforcement confirms evidence publicly, it remains part of an active and evolving investigation. Nancy vanished from her residence in Tucson during a narrow overnight window. Investigators have already acknowledged suspicious elements at the original scene, including tampered surveillance equipment and blood evidence inside the home. Those facts established early on that this was not a voluntary disappearance. If detectives are now examining an additional property, it signals that the case may have progressed beyond initial theory. Secondary locations in cases like this often emerge through digital tracking, vehicle data, witness tips, or financial records. Each lead must be carefully verified before public disclosure to protect the integrity of the case. Authorities have not announced an arrest. They have not publicly identified a suspect.
But this, according to the New York Post, President Trump saying that those responsible for kidnapping Nancy Guthrie must release her unharmed or they will face the most severe federal penalty.
16 days. Nancy Guthrie.
We need to use a lot of caution about jumping to conclusions with the glove. If there were other aspects of that glove that tied it to either Nancy or someone who's already been looked at as a person of interest, then it would raise very quickly in priority. But at this point, it's more like a Hail Mary.
Still, the FBI says they're putting the DNA from the glove into their national database. Another question, the suspect's clothes, like the mask and zip-up jacket.
The sheriff says it's possible that, like the suspect's backpack, the clothes were also purchased at a Walmart. He says they're currently working with Walmart management to determine who, if anyone, bought all or some of those items. The sheriff
They have also not officially confirmed that Nancy was transported to any other location. Responsible reporting requires acknowledging those boundaries clearly. However, in many major investigations, breakthroughs come quietly. A search warrant executed without publicity, a forensic match that takes weeks to process, a digital record that finally aligns with the timeline. What appears to the public as silence may actually be preparation. The truth in this case will ultimately depend on confirmed evidence, not speculation. If the alleged secondary property contains critical findings, it could become the turning point investigators need. Until then, the case remains open, active, and unresolved.
Sheriff says he believes Nancy Guthrie is being held close to her home. Here is more.
And then the next day we solve it. Here's one that I go, man, I wish we could solve it in the next 10 minutes. It may be the next 10 days, the next 10 months, or worse.
Wow, the next 10 months or worse. Andres Gutierrez, as he has been for so many days, faithfully at his post in Tucson. What's the latest?
Major, there have been no huge developments here on day 18 of the search. However, we are getting some of the nuances in this very complex investigation. This afternoon, the Pima County Sheriff's Department says that the only video that we have seen that the FBI shared with us of that man at Nancy Guthrie's front door is the only usable and video that the engineers over at Google have been able to recover. There are additional cameras here from her property. One we saw getting plucked from the rooftop by FBI agents on Friday the 6th. They are still working to try to see if there's any usable video. They are hopeful that the very smart engineers over at Google will be able to help them do that and extract video that they can share with the public and hopefully help them churn up additional leads. They have not ruled out that the person that you saw in that doorbell video didn't work without an accomplice. So they believe that this person may have also had a second individual who ended up snatching Nancy in the middle of the night. Another big name that law enforcement are working with is Walmart. They are trying to identify the man in that video by what he had. We know that the backpack, that black Ozark Trail hiker backpack, is sold exclusively at the retail giant. Authorities say that the company has turned over purchase records with names, and so detectives are right now cross-referencing dates, stores, and transactions. FBI agents are also visiting local gun stores here in Tucson, trying to identify where that guy bought that firearm and that holster that he had close to his groin, not by his side. And a lot of firearms experts saying that it just shows how much of an amateur he was in carrying out this crime. There is also DNA evidence that was found inside Nancy's house that doesn't belong to her or her relatives, and so they're trying to figure out who.
Like, share, and subscribe to the Crime Narrator for continued updates as verified facts emerge in this investigation.